Hello, fellow book people. Today I'm here for Discworld December, or Disc-ember as I'm trying to push it, which is another freaking easy read along in the spirit of Paperback Junkie, but this one hosted by Graham Quigley, who has set you the challenge of you have to read just one Discworld novel, the fantasy series by Terry Pratchett, and read it and post a video of it by the end of December, of which I will hopefully crush if I can actually get all the other book reviews that I've made out of the way. So I am doing what you should not do if you are a beginner. This is not recommended at home, kids, unless you've done the full due diligence. I'm starting out with The Color of Magic, Terry Pratchett's first book. I have read, I think there's like 47 or something of Terry Pratchett's books. I've read 45 or something. I stopped reading them at the end just because I wasn't getting along with them at the end. I felt like things were dropping off, and hey, that's a freaking good run for a writer to get that many books. And I'm not going to talk about Terry Pratchett's illness because I don't think that's relevant. But yes, I've decided I'd start out with The Color of Magic, which is Discworld #1, which introduces us to Rincewind, the failed, cowardly wizard, and who gets saddled with Two Flowers, who is a tourist from the counterweight continent. And when you're asking, what's the counterweight continent? Because you've never heard of Discworld before. Discworld is, as it says on the tin, a flat world, where flat fantasy world where literally you can go over the side, and Pratchett, being his logical self, says, and there's a counterweight continent below, and this is where Two Flower comes from. And Two Flower is, I think, quite appropriately a tourist in this world, which actually kind of puts me in mind of Diana Wynne Jones, and a book I've always wanted to get to, which is her Rough Guide to Fantasy, which is sort of a tour guide of fantasy tropes. And I think this is Terry Pratchett sort of in the same kind of vein, because Pratchett is called this sort of his fantasy equivalent of what Blazing Saddles is to Westerns. And I'll get back to that later, because I think that kind of keys into one of the points why this is usually not a place where people recommend you start your fantasy books. It is very much, it's a book that is engaged with taking the piss out of, and sort of celebrating and enjoying a lot of the tropes of fantasy. You've got wizards, you've got dwarves, you've got, there's dragons, there's the Cthulhu, there's like kind of Cthulhu myths in here. There's a lot of sword and sorcery kind of fantasy stuff. There's a duo at the beginning that sort of mirror in a way, or a kind of a mirror, or kind of an alternative to Rincewind and Two Flower, which there's a kind of a tall barbarian. I think it's tall barbarian, and a thief character, which is very much Fritz Leiber's Faffer and the Grey Mouse. And indeed, this book is divided up into I think it's 4 sections, and they very much play as kind of like short stories or novellas, kind of interconnected ones, which has really got the feel of kind of the old pulps where writers would, they'd write one adventure of their duo, and then, you join them later for another one. In this case, it very much follows from one adventure to the next adventure to the next adventure. And indeed, The Light Fantastic, which is the next book in the series, this is sort of a duology. It's like these two books actually kind of go together, but I'm lazy, and I figured, if I tried to read both of them, I probably would never get this out in December. So I've decided just to do this one. So, and I think one of my arguments for why, someone might not want to start out with this book is, unless you're somebody who knows sort of 70s and 80s fantasy, which was sort of one of the last big high points of fantasy. Fantasy is kind of going through a big kind of renaissance at the moment. This was the last time where it was token knockoffs. It was Dungeons and Dragons. And it's funny because in this book, there's gods, and they're playing dice. They're literally rolling the dice to see what's going to happen to poor Rincewind and Two Flower, which is, I was a Dungeons and Dragons geek, which, kids at home, this is where you had paper and pen and character sheets, and you rolled dice, no computers in sight, and you basically Billy ruined the whole Saturday afternoon of drinking pop and things because he got so stickler with the rules, and it's like, come on, we just want to kill orcs and get treasure. And a lot of the fiction of that time, there was a good hunk of the fiction of that time that did that, or was just kind of a mindless aping of Tolkien. A lot of the window dressing without actually any of the kind of the deep thought behind it. And I mean, that's something with Pratchett. Is Pratchett, you can tell that he loves fantasy because he wants to, in one way, kind of, I'm going to parody it by taking it seriously. There's a thing of like, oh, there's dragons in this book, but literally he makes the dragons in this book imaginary. And because they're so stupid, they think they're physical impossibilities, and it's so his thought is like, unless someone is like conscious and able to keep the thought of the dragon together, it's gonna vanish and disappear. Now later on, we get like a dog-sized dragon. Later on in many books down the series, we get like kind of dog-sized dragons, which are actually, because of their volatile guts, are more of a danger of exploding than they are of, harassing dwarves and taking all their treasure and stuff like that. So it's very much like, I think, you can find Blazing Saddles really, funny and entertaining now, but if you don't know about like all the kind of the cowboys and westerns that it's actually making fun of, it's less engaging of a thing. There's that, and there's also that Rincewind himself. Rincewind is sort of a part of the there's the Discworld series is definitely broken up into different kind of blocks, and one of them is the wizards. This is a world, and then Pratchett just plays in this world and does different things, and one of the blocks is the wizards and Rincewind. And Rincewind is someone, actually, I found him a little bit more engaging this time, but he is a coward. He is a guy who just wants to run away, which is in some ways it's a reaction to the noble, tough warrior who's always gonna go into danger. It's like, Rincewind's gonna go the other way really fast as he can, and so there's kind of a manic thing. There's sort of a manic thing, which maybe you could get annoyed with. I'm sure you as a viewer have no conception of getting annoyed with someone's manic energy, which I sometimes get myself. So I'll take a deep breath and try not to be as annoying as Rincewind. Just take this as an illustration that it can get, like, it's constant parody, it's constant haha funny, which, it can kind of skim the surface, and it's interesting that later Rincewind gets more interested in kind of writing more rounded characters, female characters. This book is not really This book is bouncing off like a lot of, like, there's a dragon rider woman who's like in a loincloth and nothing else except for long hair. And he doesn't really, he sort of just, he makes fun of that trope, but he doesn't really kind of try to subvert or make anything interesting about that. Where in later books, you get, like, I think it's Susan, the granddaughter of Death. You get Tiffany Aiken. You get all the wizards. Not to mention a monstrous regiment, which I won't go into anymore because that's another favorite book of his. So it's a fun I think it's a fun introduction. I grew up in the 80s, so I was kind of aware of all those tropes. So I did actually start out with this, and it was like, oh, okay, this is fun. And I had enough momentum, and it carried me through into the more interesting books. You start into the death books, into Mort and stuff like that. Following this death character who apparently appears whenever time it's time to take a wizard off to the afterlife. The death will show up, and he's always represented in the books as speaking in all caps. And he's very frustrated with Rincewind because Rincewind refuses to die, and he's quite annoying that way. So yes, I surprisingly enough, I think I enjoyed it more this time. Maybe probably because I'd actually probably read some Fritz Lieber by this point, and I've kind of gotten a little bit more into Sword and Sorcerer. I think I've just read some Conan as well, Robert E. Howard, so kind of the pulp stuff. So there's certain different veins that actually I think I got more background, that I was actually better able to enjoy it this time. And also I started at The Color of Magic and I worked my way through Terry Pratchett. It's also kind of rewards to, this is the beginning of Terry Pratchett, and I can look forward to all the stuff that's going to happen later. It's one of these, it's one of these things where you get, kind of like stuff like equal rights, which is RITES, but it's definitely about there's a bit of a feminism thing. There's there's the wizards clashing with the witches, and the witches definitely coming off better. The Truth, which is like his newspaper novel. You get Guards, all the Vimes novels. Vimes is the captain of the watch, and those are all the kind of the crime novels, stuff like that. There's Hogfather, his Christmas novel, which I think some people have already have chosen for this Christmas time of year. And okay, I'm not into the Christmas time of year. I'm just into the surviving Christmas time of year. And yeah, The Monstrous Regiment, which is definitely his war novel. Which I think kind of shows that Pratchett, while he's making fun of all these fantasy tropes, he actually he fell into, it's like, well, actually I can use this fantasy world to explore a lot more. I can use it to take concepts in the modern world and run them through the fantasy thing, kind of think them through that way, and help people look at stuff through, and also just kind of be really entertaining books. Sometimes Pratchett books, I go, well, it was fun, I enjoyed myself, and I have a trouble speaking about it more than that. In this book, actually, there's an early example of that, of Two Flower, coming from what sounds like a much more mundane kind of the counterweight continent, introduces this idea of fire insurance to Ankh-Morpork, with terrible results to Ankh-Morpork, which actually has one of these wonderful kind of sardonic British humor lines where they're talking about how the Ankh and Morpork are like two sides of the city, and they're divided by a river, and how the people on the one side of the thing heroically make sure they destroy the bridge so that the fire won't spread over onto their side and cut off all the poor people on the other side. That's that kind of sardonic British humor. This is where people reach for things like, Douglas Adams and, that kind of, C.G. Chesterton. I think Pratchett really, at the beginning, he is much more, he probably does feel more like someone like Douglas Adams, but as he goes along, he develops his own style, he develops his own feel, he really stands on his own feet as somebody who creates vivid characters, all playing within this world. And it doesn't get old because he's not following, God, if these books were 47 novels of Rincewind, I would have bailed after probably 2 or 3. So I find, a little Rincewind goes a long way. So yes, but that said, I really enjoyed myself, and I am going to go on to, where did I put it? I will go on to, at some point, probably in the new year, The Light Fantastic, because if I'm going to enjoy Terry Pratchett again, which is probably what this presages for me, this Discworld December, I will take my time and go through the books. I mean, who knows? Maybe by that time I get to the end, I'll be able to better enjoy some of his later books that I didn't decide to continue on with this time. So yes, definitely go to Graham Quigley's site and see what he's done. Take a look and see around who else is participating in Discworld December. And I will, as I'm coming up to 14 minutes on my usual blabber, I would like to recommend One Book, One Review, who she does 2-minute, 3-minute, 4-minute reviews. And I wish I could just say, that's editing, yeah, blah, blah, blah. No, she's someone who has a focused mind and is able to sum up, is able to have said everything that I said in this video, but without wasting your time. And of course, I put it at the very end of my video where no one's going to see it, but I'll put it in the link down below. She reviews Terry Pratchett and also does a lot of other reviews. And as, I don't know, it's like, this is how I operate, but I also envy her. I envy her ability to make these short, sharp reviews and make the reviews that are actually short, sharp, and actually get into the depth of stuff as way better than I do. So that's my big fan letter to One Book, One Review. So yes, Disc-ember. We're calling it December, at least on this channel. Graham Quigley said he would steal it. Hopefully he will, because that would be my little pithy my pithy little contribution to it. However, now I'm coming up to 15 minutes, so I will shut the hell up. More videos later.